We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. Today we go behind the headlines on the subject of those electric scooters we see all over town. Dozens of people have been injured riding them. It's reached the point where city officials, company representatives, and physicians are planning a meeting to see what can be done about it. Two of our news staffers, Shahla Farzan and Kae Petrin, have been covering that story. In a recorded interview with them, I asked Shahla about the increase in those injuries.
I think that there are probably three main reasons behind it. One being rider inexperience or error. I think for the first time, or rather when people get on a scooter for the first time, it's often the first time they've ever ridden one here. And so there is a learning curve. I think that you need to have good balance and good hand-eye coordination, and not every rider does. I also think that road conditions play a really big role. If you hit a pothole with one of these scooters, the wheel width is pretty small, and you're more likely to fall off. And then the other reason could be equipment malfunction. And that was something we saw during our interviews, that there were people who had experienced equipment malfunction on these scooters.
Kay, what kind of injuries are we talking about?
It varies. A lot of people are just getting scraped up. We're hearing from people who didn't necessarily even go to the hospital. They just banged their knee. But the hospitals did report some more severe injuries, arm and leg fractures and brain hemorrhages. But it's worth saying, those were the minority of injuries.
Shahla, we may just be seeing the tip of the iceberg, too, because your information is coming from hospitals. We don't know how many people didn't go to the hospital.
Exactly. And I think there are some people who may not go to the hospital or may go to urgent care centers. So I do agree. I think that we don't really know how many people are injured on scooters in St. Louis.
It's my impression, Kay, too, that part of the issue is the equipment itself, that these scooters sometimes aren't as reliable, I think, as Shahla has indicated, but also that they break sometimes and cause people to fall.
Yeah, it's not clear what proportion of injuries is associated with that. There's really not good tracking methods to know what's happening. But we have heard, anecdotal evidence, seen people posting pictures of their broken scooters and seen some recalls actually on certain lines of scooters that were prone to malfunction.
Shahla, how are the companies reacting to this?
Well, we don't really know. They've been pretty close-lipped throughout this process, and we have reached out to them several times, both companies that are in St. Louis, Lime and Bird. So it's still a bit of a mystery. We do know that they are part of a safety task force that the city of St. Louis is convening today, actually. And so that safety task force is hopefully going to address some of these concerns.
What kinds of options, Kay, do you think they have?
So that was something that we asked the city, and they were pretty reluctant to put a specific list of things out there until after the task force. Deanna Venker, the commissioner of traffic, pointed to a couple of things that they sort of know about, which, number one, the fire department doesn't currently have a way to report scooter-related accidents specifically. So they pointed to a couple of things, but they were, said, we don't want to commit. It's too early to say what we might be changing or what we might be considering changing because we haven't met to discuss the issues yet.
Are there liability issues here? I mean, if people are getting hurt, is the company perhaps liable for any of these injuries?
Potentially. I think that might be something that you know about more than I do, Kay.
I don't know a ton about that. I know that there have been some other cities that have opened up lawsuits against the companies, but it's something that is pretty ambiguous. A lot of the user agreements are pretty clear. If you get injured, it's not necessarily something that we're responsible for. You got to wear a helmet. A lot of these accidents are happening with people not wearing helmets, which can complicate the legal landscape there.
Speaking of complications, my impression is from your story that the company will make helmets available, but it's a rather cumbersome procedure?
It depends on the company. I don't know that we talked to anyone who, tried to go through the process. So I don't know that I could necessarily say it's cumbersome. Bird will send you a helmet if you provide the shipping. And Lime has what appear to be short-term, sort of periods where you can get a free helmet. Neither of the companies agreed to sort of do interviews, so we don't have as much information about those options as we'd like to.
Yeah. What about the responsibility of the riders, Shahla? I mean, they have to bear some of the burden here, if you will. They don't wear the helmets and they drive them on sidewalks and places you indicated that can be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we do need to acknowledge, that the city of St. Louis does have regulations on the books regarding these electric scooters, specifically that riders all need to wear helmets, which we see, anecdotally, not many riders in St. Louis wearing helmets, and also that they're not allowed to ride on sidewalks. It does pose a
But they do.
They do ride on sidewalks, and we heard from one particular rider who was riding along the riverfront, and he didn't want to ride on the cobblestones, so he rode on the sidewalk, and he hit a metal rope that was securing a barge, flipped over the handlebars, and thinks he might have a hairline fracture in his arm, and wasn't wearing a helmet and biking at night, or riding at night rather. So I do think that riders need to bear the responsibility, but how much of that responsibility for safety, it's kind of an open question.
Has the electric scooter fad trend worked well in other cities? And okay, I'll ask you that. And in terms of, it came in with quite a burst of enthusiasm. Has it been tamped down at all in other places? It's
really seasonal, I think, is part of what we're seeing. Here at least we had over 100,000 rides that the companies reported to the city between sort of August, when these scooters dropped on the streets, and the sort of late October period. But now it's really cold and there's only 300 scooters on the streets. So I think the question is, is it still going to be that popular when it comes back in the spring? Some cities have found that, yeah, it is. It seems to not be, getting less popular. Other cities have had issues with the scooters, or changed their permitting, or sort of been like, you guys got to leave. So it's really depended on what the local cities are, how they're handling it, how they're structured, and it's just such a mixed bag from place to place.
Shahla, going back to the responsibility of the drivers and the accidents and the illegal actions on the part of the drivers, is there a role for the police in this?
Well, I think there is a role, considering that St. Louis does have these regulations on the books, and they don't appear to be being enforced. I think, we spoke with one city representative who said, our priority is violent crime, not enforcing these regulations. So yes, I do think there's a role for the police, but I think that this is something that they're struggling with as well.
They've got other things to do, obviously, as you indicate. Final thoughts, Kae, do you have anything you want to add to this discussion?
I mean, I think it's also important to consider that this is a totally new thing. It's we've never had anything like this in St. Louis, and even in other cities, these companies are pretty new. So there's not a lot of models to pull from that have been shown, just had long-term results. So there is still just the question of how much of this is because it's new and how much of this, can be fixed when we're thinking about it.
Shahla, final thought? I wonder if it was well thought out before implementing this whole scooter thing, if they thought it through as well as they should have.
That I don't know. But I do think that kind of going back to kind of the impetus behind this meeting, the fact is that, ER doctors, emergency room doctors, were the ones who raised these concerns and sent a letter to Mayor Letta Crewson. And so I think that we think that's the main reason behind the safety task force, was them requesting this specific meeting. So we'll have to see where it goes.
But the doctors sent that message in November, I believe.
That's right, November 8th.
It's been quite a while since any action has been taken. Okay, well, let's leave it at that and wait for the outcome of the meeting and find out what they're going to do about it, if anything.
Thanks, Don.
Shahla Farzan and Kae Petrin of St. Louis Public Radio News. They've been covering the spate of injuries on those scooters we've been seeing all over town. That safety meeting set for today that we mentioned has been rescheduled, by the way, because of today's weather.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.